Yes, it's true. The Honda Prologue is based on the Chevy Blazer EV, but in this video, I want to figure out whether this is better or worse than the Blazer EV, and also go over the pros and the cons of this compared to that. We'll also cover the exterior styling, the interior styling, talk about how it drives, as well as talking about the kind of efficiency you can expect and the range you can expect, as well as the pricing and how it compares to the competition. But as far as the styling here on the Prologue, I think it's actually a really nice look, and obviously much different than the Blazer. It really tones down the wilder styling you have on the Blazer EV, and I think that's great. It gives you two different options. For people who don't want the bold styling of the Chevy, you have some nice, handsome, and more understated styling for sure here with the Honda. And I think they did a really good job of taking the Chevy bones and turning it into a Honda here. It looks like a Honda and really futuristic, and exactly like how you would honestly probably expect a Honda SUV that's electric to look like. And so, you know, up front there, just a nice smoothed over front end, and you also have the new Honda logos here, which is something they're rolling out with their EVs, and it's great to see that here on this. Coming down to the sides though, you do have some stuff that is reminiscent of the Blazer. You have the same door handles as the Chevy. The side silhouette, you know, is fairly similar. Then going out to the back though, it's also, again, very much different than the Blazer, but again, a really nice look. I think actually the back end is my favorite part of the styling on the Prologue here. I think it looks really nice, and as far as how it compares to a more conventional Honda SUV like a CR-V, for example, it's about 8 inches longer than a CR-V and about 5 inches wider. It's also about 1.5 inches lower though, and because of that, you'll see there's some trade-offs that are made on the interior as a result of that. On the inside of the Prologue though, they didn't change quite as much as they did on the outside. There's a lot of Chevy carryover here on the inside of the Prologue. So let's go over all the things that are the same, all the things that are different, and some areas where this is better than a Blazer, some areas where it might be worse. So first off, sitting down in these seats, you have these seats that I think are pretty similar to the Blazers, just with a different kind of seat skin on them here. But they're really nice seats though. You have perforation here. They're heated as standard, by the way, in all versions of the Prologue. Cooling is only on this top Elite trim, so that's the only way you get that. But you know, really nice seats, and great you have cooled seats, because that's something that basically every other Honda SUV can't provide. So that is one good thing you get from the Blazer here, are cooled seats. The steering wheel is basically the same as the Blazer, but that's also really a nice wheel. You know, you have a nice 993 grip. You have this cool regen paddle on the back here that will maximize your regen on demand if you want that. It's also a heated steering wheel here in this top version, which is great. The only buttons that are missing though are Super Cruise, because you don't get Super Cruise on the Prologue like you can get on the Blazer. So one big difference there, but otherwise, you know, a great wheel, and looks nice too. The gauges are actually a really nice look as well. I kind of prefer this reskinning. It's a little cleaner and simpler here for Honda's version. All the same basics, where you can have the map view and the driver assistance view, you know, the same basic mechanicals there. But otherwise though, I mean, it's just a nice, simple display, and I think it, you know, is pretty good. The only one thing I was hoping for is that they would veer away from Chevy's decision to not show you an actual percentage readout, and unfortunately this still sticks to the same thing as Chevy. I don't know if that's something they couldn't change or what, but you know, they stuck with Chevy's formula of having just the range readout and then having this fuel gauge style bar that just tells you a rough estimate of what your actual percentage is for the battery. You have to actually turn the vehicle off and open the door in order for it to show you the amount of percentage you have left on the battery there. I don't know why. Hopefully that's something that all of these companies in the GM portfolio here decide to change at some point, but unfortunately Honda weren't able to change that. But otherwise, fine gauges. You also do have a head-up display here in this Elite version as well. And then coming over to the center here, so this is another big change in one good way and one bad way. First off, we have this 11.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system, and that's a lot smaller than the 17.8-inch screen I believe you get in the Blazer EV. And that's like, you know, got this cool curvature to it. This is just a simple rectangle with a lot of dead space and bezels. And it's also been slightly unresponsive to my touch sometimes. I'm not sure why, because I've never had any unresponsive issues with any of the GM screens with their version of this software. So I'm not sure what the deal is with this screen, which I believe this actual screen itself is unique here to the Honda, but it's again running that familiar software. But it's, you know, an Android automotive based software. But the biggest news news here is it does have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and just has that smartphone integration. That is something that GM has vowed to not offer on all of their EVs here, aside from the Lyriq, which was grandfathered in, but the Blazer does not have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That's a big deal for a lot of people who say that that feature is a must-have. So if you really like the GM Ultium platform, you like a lot of the things about the Blazer, but you just want CarPlay, the Prologue honestly might win people over just for the fact that you have CarPlay and Android Auto here. And I love that Honda did decide we're going to do this even if Chevy doesn't want to. So that's great. I'm so happy to have that here. And I'm one of those people that, you know, I love CarPlay. So, you know, this is a real big edge for the Prologue, and I'm glad they did that. Otherwise, you do have, you know, all the Google built-in stuff. So you have Google Maps built in, you have Google Assistant, you have all these different things here that you can call up, Amazon Alexa, all that. And it does have the Play Store. So if you want to download your own apps and have them run natively on here, you can do that with this system as well. And, you know, it has a volume knob, and you know, works pretty well otherwise, as long as it is responsive to those touches, which isn't a guarantee, at least in this vehicle. Then coming down, you have the same exact climate controls as the Blazer. Copy and pasted, no differences whatsoever. But I mean, I always thought they were nice. You have physical buttons here. I like how you have the little dials there with the climate controls, which, by the way, you get standard dual zone climate control in all versions of the Prologue, which is great, but, you know, just not unique and, you know, right out of the Chevy. Other things that are right out of the Chevy are the door panel switches. The window switches are all GM. The memory switches here for the unlock and lock and all that, that's all GM. Also, if you're used to Hondas, you're going to have to get used to having the windshield wipers here on the left stalk with this little toggle to turn them on. Unfortunately, you know, they weren't able to carry over any of the Honda switchgear whatsoever, it seems. So we even have GM's column mounted shifter, which I think is actually not one of the best column mounted shifters, but it's nice to have it on the column because it does free up a lot of space here in the middle. And speaking of the middle, it's an interesting approach. So one good thing is you have like this wireless charging pad is standard, but strangely they made it worse than GM's, because all the GM vehicles have little rubber notches to hold your phone in place better. This is just this like large pocket that I think would still hold your phone in better than the average flat wireless charging mat, but just not as secure. That's one thing they could have copy and pasted over. It would have been fine. They chose not to do that there. But otherwise, you know, you just have this giant area with, you know, no defined features. It's just a giant place. You could obviously fit like a iPad perfectly in there or something. I mean, it's massive, but you know, most others use some barriers there to make it a little more useful. But anyway, that's how they chose to do it. You also have two USB-C jacks and a power outlet in there, and beneath that you also have another nice wide open space there to store stuff. You also have a center armrest, which is a little bit padded. I think it's actually slightly softer than the Blazer from my memory, but anyway, you open that up, you have a nice deep bin in there with a little tray that's removable on the top here as well. You also have pockets on the doors here as well that are pretty good size. The back seat here in the Prologue is really great. That is one of the other benefits you get from the Blazer, is it's a really long platform. The wheelbase is also about 8 inches longer than a CR-V, in addition to, you know, having just the exterior length be longer. So I mean, I'm 5'9", be sitting behind myself. I have about 6 inches of legroom to spare, lots and lots of space. But the thing is, I don't have a ton of headroom. I have maybe 2 to 3 inches of headroom there to spare. Maybe part of that is to be blamed on this, you know, dual pane sunroof here that does open up and has the cover over it, which is great. But you know, it's just not going to be super spacious, honestly, for tall people because of the way they chose to have this, you know, very sleek profile with the lower roof here. But otherwise, it's a really great back seat. You can see they also have their own air vents, another little cubby there in the front, and some power outlets, as well as a regular house current plug there too. There's also full down center armrests, pockets in those doors. But in those doors, you will see they really downgraded the materials. Up front here, it's actually more Honda-like with the feel of the vinyls here, but in the back it's just scratchy hard GM plastic. And I think honestly even the Blazer has nicer back seat door panels. So I don't know what the choice was there, aside from just cost cutting, obviously, but I'm not sure why even this Elite version, which is almost $60,000, has that kind of cheap plastic for the back seats. It's just not acceptable, but they're soft, comfortable seats otherwise. And then the cargo space is another mixed bag here. It's a fairly long, wide space, and beneath the floor, you lift up that floor, you'll see a really deep cubby there and another little spot to, you know, fit something small. But by the numbers, at least, this is way down on cargo capacity compared to a CR-V. This has only 24 cubic feet of cargo space in the back there compared to 39 in a CR-V. Obviously, part of that is the height. You can stack more in a CR-V, but it's also, I think, just a larger space in general as far as width and length goes compared to CR-V as well, which is strange because, and this is something I complained about the Blazer as well, where you have this larger vehicle they classify it as a mid-size SUV, yet you have the same amount of cargo space as compact SUVs in the electric segment, and honestly less than some. Like, you have stuff like the Mustang Mach-E, which has more cargo space than this even, plus you get the frunk in that. Tesla Model Y is another one, you know, and so just lots of wasted space, it seems. I'm not sure, you know, why they decided to do it that way, but, you know, that's just one thing. You're going to want to make sure you check this vehicle out. If you're used to stuff like CR-Vs, you might be like, oh, it's bigger than a CR-V, it's going to be great. Might not be as great as you might be expecting, so definitely check that out for yourself. But overall, you know, still, again, the fact we have CarPlay is the one redeeming thing for sure, and everything else, you know, some of it's going to be just design choices, and if you don't like the over-the-top interior you get in the Blazer, you know, this more subdued approach might be right up your alley. But let's turn it on and go for a drive. Another thing is we have a Chevy key fob here in the Honda. I guess they couldn't transfer over their own stuff into you know, their own Honda shell, but so we just have a Chevy key that has a little crude cut out there for the Honda logo, and that's it. But of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button, and it turns right on with all the same GM chimes. Another thing we have, they couldn't have bothered to swap like the MP3 file for the chimes. I don't know. I guess these are things they can't change for whatever reason, but like, you know, you sit in this, it's going to sound like a GM vehicle. It feels like a GM vehicle with all the buttons, and yeah, just, I wish they would have just done a little bit more. All right, so setting off here in the Prologue. So the first thing you notice about it, well, the first thing I think I'm noticing is that it does feel like a pretty big vehicle. It does feel like a mid-sized vehicle behind the wheel. It's definitely substantial and large. You know, seating position is decently high, but it's just, you know, pretty wide. Again, things that extra width compared to like a CR-V or something like that. Although Honda does say that they did improve the sight lines compared to the Blazer. They lowered the cowl here so that you're able to see over a little bit better. But there's another compromise, because even though visibility in the front is very good here, you know, you do have a thicker A-pillar at the base, but it's kind of out of your way, so it's not really too much of an issue. So really good visibility up front, but in the back, you don't have the option for the camera rearview mirror that the Blazer has. And as a result, you have a very skinny rear window there, and also the rear wiper is tiny. So in the winter time or any kind of inclement weather, that might not be the best there either. So keep that in mind. And here on the Elite version, you do get the 360-degree view, so that'll help you whenever you're maneuvering, at least at low speeds. Other things here to notice. Well, I gotta say that, you know, they said that they, you know, calibrated everything, tuned everything differently to make it feel like a Honda. I just spent a week with a Blazer not too long ago, just back earlier this summer, and this feels honestly like identical to me, to be completely honest. I think the ride is slightly smoother for sure, but all the inputs are the same to me. So throttle response is really the same, where it's immediate, it's electric, you know, it's gonna have good punch, but it's nicely damped, so it doesn't ramp up overly quickly or harshly like you get with some other EVs out there. You know, but brakes feel very similar, but that's also a good thing, because GM does a really good job blending the brake pedals and you know, blending that regen seamlessly, and this does that very well too. So I think that's another good aspect here of the Prologue. The one thing also that is, if you are an enthusiast at least, a good thing about the Prologue is the fact that you have 275 wide tires, which really helps with handling, in addition to having, again, that wheelbase that's 8 inches longer than a CR-V. You know, you're going to have a lot more poise, it's a lot more planted, obviously having the low center of gravity of that Ultium platform, that electric battery, you know, being nice and low there in the floor is going to give you really good handling. And I'm not going to push this too much because, you know, it's not a sports car or anything, but it does handle itself really well. No kind of fancy suspension or anything like that, you know, just basic coil springs and independent rear suspension and all that kind of stuff. But you know, it handles really well. I mean, these bumps are, you know, pretty rough, and very uneven pavement and all that, and it's gliding over it really well. And I think I would be feeling this a lot more in a Blazer. So I think the suspension is definitely the biggest thing, is just the softness that you have here with this. And I can really appreciate that. I think for something like this, the softer feel is, again, going to go in line with what I think most Honda buyers look for. Softer exterior, softer ride, more subdued interior. Everything about the Prologue is just a more subdued Blazer in many ways, and that's great. I think that's a really nice option for people to have. And so, yeah, I think it's really nice the way the handling is here in this. I mean, it's definitely heavy. You feel that weight like an EV. This is almost 5,300 pounds. So that's just, par for the course with these types of things. But I think it handles itself very, very well. And, it's also pretty quiet. This road's kind of rough that we're on here. And, you can, hear me talking just fine. I'm not having to raise my voice or anything. And yeah, just a really pleasant thing to cruise down the road in. But I'm going to come to a stop here and put it into the sport mode, which is buried over here on the left hand side. We're in that sport mode though, and let's do a little acceleration. Here we go. Alright, so it lifts the nose a little bit. Oh, it kind of ramps up as you get up to some higher speed there a little bit. It feels pretty good, honestly. It feels a little quicker than I was expecting, to be completely honest, because this is slow compared to some of the other competitors. Slow-ish, I guess I should say. So it's 288 horsepower, 333 pound-feet of torque here for this all-wheel drive version of the Prologue. You can get a front-wheel drive version with just 212 horsepower if you don't need a bunch of power. That version, I'm sure, will be totally fine. And that will be the way to get the best range, with those ones doing 296 miles of range compared to 273 miles of range for this one. But getting back to the power though, these are doing like a 5.9 seconds 0 to 60, I think is what Car and Driver got. And that's like over a second slower than like an IONIQ 5 from Hyundai, the Kia EV6. Even the Mustang Mach-E has a quicker time by almost a second, I think. So, that's just kind of the choice you're making here. Again, it's the same kind of deal, because the Blazer, you can get punchier versions of that. It's the same kind of theme here with this, is it's just, smoothed over, softer. But again, that's totally okay, because not everyone needs their EV to be some sporty thing that's super fast and blows them away with acceleration. This is still really punchy, again, way faster than any kind of CRV you're used to or anything like that. So still really, really good as far as that goes. But getting back to the battery and the electric components, this one runs an 85 kilowatt hour battery. That means you get 150 kilowatt fast charging, DC fast charging, and that is, par for the course these days. That's not amazing. Stuff like the Hyundai and the Kia do charge like 230, so there's some that do a lot more, but stuff like the Mustang Mach-E does exactly the same 150 kind of peak rate there. So I'd say, totally middle of the road, and that's totally okay too. Should be fine. It's overall just, really good that they shared so many things here with the Blazer. The only thing I will say though, getting back to the tires, 275 wide tires are great for handling. They're not great for ownership costs, because when you got a tire that wide, they're not cheap to replace. So there's one thing to keep in mind with this, if you are choosing a Prologue or the Blazer for that matter, those nice wide tires are exciting, but they are going to come at a cost. So just prepare for that if you do go for one of those. Another really nice thing though about the base version of the Prologue, in addition to that extra range you get, is just all the standard safety equipment you get. All Prologues come with adaptive cruise control as standard, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, lane departure alert, basically everything, automatic emergency braking, whatever you can think of, pretty much it comes on here, aside from, again, Super Cruise, like I mentioned earlier in the interior segment. You don't get Super Cruise here in this, and so that is going to be the one thing you're going to have to be okay with not having if you are, going for this over the GM vehicles. The last thing to mention though is pricing and how it compares to the competition. So the 2024 Prologue starts at $48,795, and then this one as tested is nearly $60,000 fully loaded. And at those prices, it's simply not competitive. Lease prices will depend, of course, on your area and where you're buying and when you're buying. But for my area, at the time of me recording this at the end of 2024, leases for the lower EX trim, but with all-wheel drive still, are like $229 a month with $3,000 down. And at a price like that, the Prologue gets a lot more appealing. But as far as how that compares to the competition, when judging by MSRP, basically all the best competitors are less expensive. That Blazer EV is about $3,000 less comparably equipped and allows you to get that awesome Super Cruise system, the bigger touchscreen, and some of the other stuff there that I covered. The downside is that, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and if you go for a two-wheel drive version, it's going to be rear-wheel drive versus the Honda being front-wheel drive, which means means the Honda would be more manageable in the wintertime if you decide to forego all-wheel drive. And that front-wheel drive familiarity is something that most of the others don't offer, with all the other base models being rear-wheel drive. And I think that especially people that, might see some weather but not bad enough to need all-wheel drive, that front-wheel drive familiarity that the Honda offers is really pretty unique. With only the Chevy Equinox EV, which is a little smaller, that's the only other one that really offers that. But getting back to the other competitors here, the Ford Mustang Mach-E is another strong option, coming in about $6,000 less comparably equipped, while also doing a higher 300 miles of range, offering more cargo space and a bonus front trunk space. And for 2025, it even offers ventilated seats as well. The only thing it doesn't have is a cover for the big glass roof, which might not be ideal in the sunniest of climates. The Volkswagen ID4 is about $4,000 less as well, and gives you a little more power and a massage function in its top trim, which is nice, but it has a worse interior otherwise, in my opinion, and is a little too bland as far as the driving experience and just everything overall for that vehicle. The Hyundai IONIQ 5 and Kia EV6 both will likely get price bumps for 2025 with their slight refreshes they'll be getting, but for 2024 they're about $1,000 less than the Prologue and do much faster charging, have better interiors, and they do have slightly less range, and you also don't get all-wheel drive on that one, with that one also sticking you with rear-wheel drive in the base ones. But those are some of my favorites in the segment here. So overall, I think the Prologue's appeal will really come down to the deal you get. Aside from that, in a vacuum, if it suits you better than the Blazer for the various reasons I listed, I think it's absolutely worth getting over the Blazer, especially if parts of the, part sharing don't bother you, or if, you really just want that CarPlay. For a lot of people, I think just simply CarPlay is enough to sway them to the Honda over the Chevy. Personally, though, I don't think you have to make that choice. I think the Mach-E and the IONIQ 5 are better all around and come in at less money. Now, lease deals currently for those, are pretty comparable as well to that Prologue, but again, always will come down to just the exact deal you're getting. But if it were my money, I'd probably go for a Mach-E or an IONIQ 5. But let me know your thoughts on the Prologue in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching. Thanks to Honda for providing this vehicle to the Automotive Video Association for our fall 2024 drive event, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.